Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to dive into an emotional story filled with tension, love, and sacrifice. This episode follows Uri as he stands up to his mother's harsh disapproval in order to protect Tu Tieu, the woman he loves. It's a powerful clash between family duty and true love, and every moment will leave you wondering what choice he will make. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming episodes. The afternoon sky darkens, clouds rolling low as if mirroring the storm in everyone's hearts. At the farm, the air feels unusually tense. Ly Tu Tieu, sleeves rolled up, tends to the rows of vegetables. Her hands are steady, but her mind is restless. Every seed she places into the soil feels like a fragile hope, one that could be crushed at any moment. The rustle of leaves whispers reassurance, yet her chest tightens with unease. She wants to believe love is enough, that Uri's presence by her side is unshakable, but the shadow of disapproval lingers like a constant echo. Her lips press into a thin line as she straightens up, gazing toward the orchard. She knows his mother's opinion weighs heavily on him. To be accepted by Uri's family feels like an impossible dream, yet she keeps working, as if every planted row is a prayer for a future together. Then, without warning, the sound of heavy footsteps crunches across the gravel path. Uri's mother storms into the farmyard, her voice sharp as a whip. She doesn't pause to greet, doesn't soften her glare. Instead, her eyes lock directly onto Tu Tieu, and the words spill out scathing, cold, unrelenting. "You don't belong here," she declares, her voice cutting through the open air. "You're dragging my son down with your simple farm life. He was meant to lead, to carry our company forward, not waste himself here with you." The accusation slices deep. Tu Tieu's breath falters, her fingers tightening around the hoe she still holds. She wants to defend herself, to speak of her sincerity, her quiet strength, but the words stick in her throat. Before silence can grow heavier, Uri rushes in. He positions himself squarely between his mother and Tu Tieu, his shoulders broad, his stance protective. His voice, usually measured and calm, rises with unshakable force. "Enough, mother," he declares, his chest heaving. "If you blame anyone, blame me. I chose this. I chose her. And I will protect her with everything I have." The field, moments ago, filled only with the soft sounds of nature, now holds its breath. Uri's words hang heavy in the air, defiance laced with conviction. Tu Tieu's eyes widened, both shocked and moved. His hand reaches back, lightly brushing hers, as if to reassure her that he will not let go. Uri's mother, however, does not soften. Her face hardens further, her voice rising, filled with disappointment and disbelief. "You think love will feed you? You think it will save the company when contracts collapse and partners walk away? Tu Tieu cannot give you what you need. She cannot stand beside you in boardrooms. Lynn would have known how to care for everyone, me, the company, even you. And yet you throw it away for her." The mention of Lynn stings. Tu Tieu lowers her gaze, heart pounding, ashamed that she cannot meet expectations she never agreed to bear. Uri hears the weight in his mother's tone, but he does not flinch. His jaw sets, his voice steady but pained. "Mother, I love you, but I love her too, and I won't let your comparisons tear us apart. Tu Tieu is not Lynn. She is herself. and she is enough for me. The air between them thickens. His mother shakes her head, her disappointment unmistakable. To her, Uri's words are rebellion, a betrayal of everything she has worked for. The son she raised to lead is choosing a path she cannot accept. Uri feels the sting of her judgment, but his body does not waver. His chest rises and falls like a shield, his arms slightly extended back toward Tu Tieu, as if ready to hold her closer should the words cut too deep. The confrontation simmers until silence swallows the farmyard. His mother, lips trembling with suppressed rage, finally turns away. She mutters something under her breath about wasted potential, about mistakes that will haunt him, and then storms off the way she came, her figure swallowed by the orchard's shadows. The farm exhales again. Uri's shoulders sag, though he forces himself to stand tall. He turns to Tu Tieu, his eyes clouded with both pain and determination. "I won't let her hurt you," he says softly. "I don't care what it costs me." Tu Tieu's lips part, but her voice trembles. She sees the torment in his eyes, the tug of war between filial duty and a love that demands sacrifice. She wants to tell him not to choose her over his mother, yet the warmth in her chest betrays her. His words, though heavy, are everything she has longed to hear. Night falls soon after, the golden light fading into shadows. Uri finds himself back at home, face to face with his mother once more. This time, the setting is quieter, the lamps casting a dim glow across her weary features. She sits, her hands clasped tightly, as if holding together her breaking heart. "I don't recognize you anymore," she whispers. "You were supposed to take the company forward, to honor our family. Instead, you let yourself be led astray. Do you know how much faith I placed in you?" Uri's chest aches. He kneels slightly, lowering himself to meet her eyes. "I know, Mother, and I'll never stop being your son. But my love for Tu Tieu is not a mistake. It's not a weakness. It's the one thing I am certain of, even when the rest feels uncertain." His words are sincere, but they only draw her tears. She speaks of Lynn again, praising her kindness, her thoughtfulness, her understanding of family duties. To her, Tu Tieu is nothing but a wall between Uri and his destiny. Uri listens, his heart caught between two loyalties: the company, the future she envisioned, and the woman he loves. These forces clash inside him like storms against a mountain. His hands curl into fists, not in anger, but in helplessness. Still, he straightens, his voice steady. "I will prove to you one day that Tu Tieu is not your enemy. She is my partner, and I won't abandon her." The room falls still. His mother's sigh echoes, heavy with sorrow. Uri bows his head, but his resolve burns brighter, like a lighthouse in relentless waves. He knows the path ahead will not be easy, but in that moment, he makes his choice clear. Love is the battle he will fight, even if it costs him his mother's trust. The scene fades with Uri's silent vow lingering in the air, a promise whispered to both women who define his heart. The next morning dawns crisp and cool, yet the farm feels anything but calm. A quiet hum of unease hangs in the air, as if the fields themselves know conflict still lingers. Tu Tieu rises early, her steps soft along the narrow path between rows of vegetables. The dew glistens on each leaf, but her heart feels heavy, weighed down by the storm from the night before. She pauses by a cluster of young plants, fingers brushing gently across their fragile stems. "Grow strong," she whispers to them, her voice trembling. Be braver than I am. For a moment, the world is still until the sudden crunch of footsteps shatters the fragile peace. Uri's mother has returned. Her expression is sharper than yesterday's, her eyes narrowed with cold fire. She strides across the farm like a commander entering enemy territory, her voice rising before she even reaches them. Uri, enough of this nonsense. You've hidden here long enough. The contracts are waiting. The partners are asking, and you still refuse to take responsibility. Come back with me now. Uri, who has been repairing a fence nearby, drops his tools and approaches. His shoulders square, his expression calm but firm. Tu Tieu watches anxiously as the inevitable confrontation begins again. Mother, Uri says evenly, I haven't abandoned anything. I still oversee the company. I still speak with Egan, and I still make sure nothing falls apart. But I've chosen this farm, this life, because it gives me purpose beyond money and titles. His mother's voice cracks, half with rage, half with desperation. Purpose? What of duty? What of everything I built for you? You think a farm can replace decades of sacrifice? You stand here planting vegetables while the company withers, and it's because of her. Her hand jerks toward Tu Tieu, the words dripping like venom. Tu Tieu flinches, but does not speak. Her instinct is to step back, to let Uri stand alone, but she holds her ground. Her silence is not weakness, it is resilience. Still, her heart thunders painfully, every word a reminder that she is not yet accepted. Uri closes the distance between himself and his mother, his voice lowering but carrying steel. Don't blame her. This is my decision. If you cannot see that, then blame me. But I will not let you tear her down to prove your point. The farmyard falls silent, save for the rustling of leaves. For the first time, Uri's mother falters, her eyes searching her son's face. There is no hesitation in him now, no uncertainty. He stands like a wall between the life she demands and the love he refuses to abandon. Her lips tremble, but she forces her voice steady. Uri, if you walk this path, you may lose everything. The company, the family name, even me. Uri's chest rises with a deep breath. His reply is quiet, but it carries the weight of finality. Then so be it, because losing Tu Tieu would be the one loss I could never bear. The words land like a hammer blow. His mother stares at him, stunned, her authority shaken. The fire in her eyes dims, replaced by something else hurt, perhaps even fear. Without another word, she turns and leaves, her footsteps heavy against the earth. Tu Tieu exhales shakily, realizing she has been holding her breath. Uri turns to her, his expression softening. He takes her hand gently, their fingers intertwining as if sealing an unspoken vow. No matter what happens, he says, we face it together. The day stretches on, but the tension lingers like a shadow. Uri throws himself into small tasks around the farm, his movements precise but distracted. Tu Tieu, meanwhile, finds herself wandering to the orchard. She leans against a tree, watching the sunlight filter through the branches. The beauty of the scene cannot lift the heaviness in her heart. Later, as twilight settles, she returns to the vegetable rows. The fading light paints the field in gold and amber. She kneels, pressing her palms gently against the soil, as if searching for strength. When she finally lifts her head, her eyes glisten with unshed tears. She begins to speak, her voice quiet but steady, as though confiding in unseen friends. Do you know what it feels like to love with all your heart, yet still not be enough? She asks softly, her words carried by the evening wind. I've given everything to my work, my honesty, my devotion. Still, I am seen as unworthy. Not because of what I lack, but because of who I am not. Her gaze shifts to the horizon, where the sun dips low. The first stars begin to appear, tiny sparks of light in the darkening sky. She breathes deeply, her chest rising and falling as she continues. I tell myself to be patient, that one day his mother will see me for who I am. But patience is heavy. Every harsh word echoes inside me, reminding me that love alone may not win acceptance. Her voice breaks slightly, though she forces a small smile. Yet, I cannot give up, because this love, fragile as it seems, is the strongest thing I've ever known. She lowers her head, whispering almost to herself, if I must endure this storm, I will. For Uri, for us. The camera lingers on her face, tired, sorrowful, yet resolute. The farm around her is quiet. Only the soft murmur of the stream and the rustle of leaves breaking the silence. The contrast is striking. The serenity of nature against the turmoil in her heart. Uri approaches quietly from behind, watching her for a moment before kneeling beside her. He doesn't interrupt her thoughts with words. Instead, he simply places a hand over hers, grounding her, reminding her that she is not alone. Together, they sit in silence, their silhouettes framed against the darkening sky. The orchard, the fields, the humble farm, they stand as both battleground and sanctuary. The place where love and family clash, but also where roots sink deeper with every passing day. The final shot rests on Tu Tieu's face as she looks into the distance, her expression a mixture of sorrow and quiet hope. Her voice, soft and vulnerable, closes the scene. Perhaps love cannot change a mother's heart overnight, but it can endure. And if it endures long enough, maybe one day it will be enough. The screen fades slowly, the sound of night insects filling the silence, leaving viewers suspended between despair and hope of an unfinished story waiting for its next chapter.
Trong tập phim này, cuộc sống nông trại yên bình của Tử Tiêu bị xáo trộn khi mẹ Uri đến. Giọng nói đầy giận dữ và chối bỏ. Uri ngay lập tức bước tới che chở cho Tử Tiêu và mạnh dạn tuyên bố tình yêu của mình, ngay cả khi mẹ anh cay nghiệt so sánh cô với Linh. Đêm đó, xung đột trở nên sâu sắc trong một mối quan hệ đối đầu riêng tư. Uri đối mặt với sự thất vọng của mẹ nhưng hứa không bao giờ buông tay tình yêu của mình. Ngày hôm sau, căng thẳng leo thang khi mẹ anh yêu cầu anh từ bỏ trang trại và trở về công ty. Uri vẫn kiên cường lựa chọn tình yêu thay vì nhiệm vụ, ngay cả khi có nguy cơ mất tất cả. Tập phim này kết thúc với cảnh Tử Tiêu ở trong vườn mở lòng với khán giả bị giằng xé giữa nỗi buồn và hy vọng. Đó là một bức chân dung cảm động về tình yêu, lòng trung thành, lòng dũng cảm để đấu tranh cho hạnh phúc bất chấp mọi nghịch cảnh.